Hi everyone, welcome to another model answer video. This time I'm doing the Edexcel Medicine through time question 2a model. So I really like going over these ones. I've gone over them a lot. So this question is the how useful question, and it gives you two sources and an inquiry that you are to talk about. So this will always focus on the World War One surgery case study that Edexcel do in Medicine Through Time. So this is just my example, and I will say straight away that I follow a specific way of remembering how to write this out called JPECO. So I'll go through that. It's one that is used by other teachers. Some teachers really don't like it, some really do. I find it is a useful way of remembering what to put. So this one then, I must admit I've forgotten where these two sources came from in terms of which exam they were from, but they were obviously used somewhere. So this one says, how useful are sources A and B for an inquiry into the treatment of battle injuries by medical staff on the Western Front? So the key part of this is that you're focusing on the fact it's talking about treatment. It's not talking about preventions, it's not talking about surgeries or whatever. It's talking about treatment. So this is of battle injuries by medical staff. So it's just really important that the underlined part here is really focused on, especially the treatment part. So source A is a photograph showing a British casualty clearing station on the Western Front around 1916. And then source B is from A Nurse at the Front, the First World War Diaries of Sister Edith Appleton, by Edith Appleton. They're handwritten diaries. It tells you a bit about them. They're kept by her family until published in 2012. She's a trained nurse working at a military base hospital in northern France. Here she's describing the arrival of wounded soldiers at the hospital during the early days of the Battle of the Somme, 1916. So they are the same time period. So JPECO, what is it? So you will need to address both sources. Now, you do not need to compare these sources. You do not need to conclude these sources either. So, for example, this is the 2021 mark scheme. This was about blood transfusions. I don't know what the sources are. The problem is copyright, so you will struggle to find them online. So this is, as you can see, out of 8 marks. So I would see it as 2 4-mark paragraphs. So for the top end, it says judgments on source usefulness or utility are given, and there is a criteria with developed reasoning that takes into account the provenance and why that impacts the source usefulness. We'll come to this in a minute. And the sources are analysed to support reasoning, and then your own contextual knowledge is used to interpret the sources and judge the usefulness. So this is looking at A03. 8 marks, analysis and evaluation of source utility. No credit may be given for contextual knowledge unless it's linked to the evaluation of the sources, and no credit can be given for generic comments on provenance which are not used to evaluate source content. So it's important to look at that. So this then, what is JPECO? Like I say, so the first one, so J is judgment. So straight away, I want to say how useful I find the source. So obviously, we're starting with source A. So I've said to the extent as well, which is really, really good and useful to do. So source A is largely useful in an inquiry into battlefield injuries and treatment. Straight away, my judgment is there. I've said it is useful. And if your teacher doesn't already tell you, the source is always useful. It is just easier to say that. You wouldn't throw this away and never look at it again. It is useful. You just have to say how useful it is and why. So this is my provenance. Now, the bit I always suggest is if you struggle with the word provenance, think of it as like the bit in bold. And sometimes it's not in bold, so that's not useful. But it's the bit that's always outside the actual source itself. So here, it's this sentence here above the photo. With this one, it is here above the diary extracts. Provenance is only the part here that explains what the source is to you. So I've said the photograph is from 1916, placing it around significant battles like the Battle of the Somme, whereby casualties numbered nearly 60,000 on the first day alone. That is all I've done for provenance. So I like to do NOP for provenance, which is nature, origin, purpose. I start this in year 9 because then by the time that people have picked history, they've done this before and they know what to expect. So nature is what type of source is it. Origin is who's written it or whatever, what date and where. And then P is the purpose. Why has it been created? That is the hardest one of the 3. So I've gone for nature here. I've said nature is a photograph. I've said it's 1916 and I've said it's around the Battle of the Somme. However, I have only pointed out what it tells me. But what I want to do with that is I've added a little bit of own knowledge here. So I've said, look, I know what the provenance is. I've gone as far as to add a bit of knowledge to sort of, even boost that up a bit. But the bit that's important, and they work in tandem with each other. You can't really do one without the other that much. So this is my evaluation. So I've said the photograph is therefore useful for the inquiry as it shows how casualty clearing stations operated during intensive battles such as the Somme, with a clearing station being close to the action. That is my evaluation. Is it the best evaluation ever? No, probably not. But what I've done is I've said, I know what the provenance is, I know the nature is a photograph, and I know the date is 1916. But what I have not done, and this is my biggest piece of advice to you, is never, ever, ever say in your evaluation, this is useful because it's from the time. You will not get a mark for that. All of the sources will be primary. They will all be from the time, always. So it is totally pointless writing that it is from the time. I tell my students this constantly and I still get plenty of them writing that it's from the time. This will not get you a mark. Avoid, avoid, avoid. What I've said instead is, for example, the photograph is useful because it's a photo. Yes, okay, it's from the time, but what I've said is, why is it useful it's from the time? That's because it's showing me how the casualty clearing station operates during intensive things like the Battle of the Somme. So I've given like a specific, I hope this is making sense, I've given a specific link to the photo. What I've done here is, people don't like picture sources because they don't have a quotation to give, but it's really easy. Instead of a quote, all you're doing is giving something from inside of the picture. So what I've done here is I've said the photograph shows medics treating soldiers with head injuries and other bandaged wounds. That's all I've done. That's instead of a quotation. So casualty clearing stations, that's my content before I move on. That's my content. That's provenance, the bit there. The content is just this bit. Yeah? Then, casualty clearing stations would have been just beyond the reach of enemy fire, but still close to the conflict. Soldiers would be likely treated for wounds, such as shrapnel and gas gangrene. This would have been difficult to treat, as soldiers would have been exposed to dirty terrain and conditions leading to infections. They would likely be sent back out to fight if they were treated fairly easily. That is my own knowledge that I've just added on the end. So, what's the structure, JPECO? Judgment, here. Provenance, here. Evaluation, here. Content, here. Own knowledge, here. And that spells out JPECO. So then all I do is the exact same thing for number 2. But I do not compare or contrast. So I've said it's extremely useful. The source is a diary. So again, I've gone for nature again. Kept by a trained nurse, specifically showing entries from 1916. I've gone for the date as well. But remember, I am only repeating what is here. I don't get a mark for that. If you just paraphrase what's on the page, I will not give you the mark. The examiner will not give you the mark. So, you can use it, but you need to then say why it is useful. So the source is a diary kept by trained nurse, specifically showing entries from 1916. This is very useful as Appleton documents her findings over the course of a month, showing progression of injuries or treatments. Remember, treatment of battle injuries is what we're looking at. Try not to forget to keep looking back at this. Then, instead of pointing out something in a picture, I've got a quote I can use. So, Appleton notes that some were crawling with maggots, showing how despite the soldiers getting to a base hospital, the terrain and exposure to the elements had given them infections. You could also talk about in your own knowledge here that it wasn't like the Boer Wars, which were dry. This was taking place in France, which had been farmland, which it had a lot of fertiliser in the ground, which meant that infections were really, really bad. Could talk about a base hospital, as I have here as well. A common issue was gas gangrene getting worse, leading to amputations in a base hospital far from the front lines. So again, you could talk about the evacuation system if you wanted. So Appleton was in northern France in 1916, meaning she would perhaps be seeing millions of injured soldiers who were at battles such as the Battle of the Somme. You could go for a different battle here if you wanted to. But obviously, it needs to be relevant information to the inquiry. So I'm not going to start banging on about, and Harold Gillies, the plastic surgeon, went wandering around in northern France and observing surgery so he could come and do plastic. Because my question is nothing about Harold Gillies. It's nothing about his plastic surgery, as much as it's a fantastic thing to talk about. This is about the treatment of battle wounds. So that is all you do. My suggestion as well to my students is, because timing seems to be a big thing, I would always work backwards on exam papers. Do the biggest questions first, because then if you run out of time, you've only missed a 4 marker or even just an 8 marker. I know that's still 8 marks. I know that's still 4 marks, but it's better to do the 16 marker than it is to miss it out. So if you're working backwards, by the time that you get to this answer, you will know how long you have got left, because it is only this one and then the 2 features of. So you could spend more time on this if you've actually done better than you thought timing wise, and maybe could take another minute or 2 to add some information here. However, I will say, work backwards, don't panic. Think about what you're trying to do. Write JPECO out if you use that structure. Annotate the sources. I can't urge this enough. As somebody who marks things, this is so useful to see what students are looking at. So annotate, show where the provenance is, show the NOP, show what quotes you want to use or what aspect of the source. Put some own knowledge down. But remember, if your timing is off, then you just need to do the basics and hope for the best. But yeah, you'll be fine. I hope this helped with revision and writing an answer. If you would like any further help, please do comment and let me know. I have got other videos up that talk about what's a peel paragraph. I've done ones on the Elizabethan England paper and so on. So I hope that helped, and hopefully I will see you again for another video. Okay, take care. Bye.